I bought my land 22 years ago, 13 acres of rolling pasture, a quiet creek, and a hill that caught the sunrise like a stage spotlight. I had built everything on that land myself, the cabin, the workshop, the fencing, even the gravel road leading to the gate. So when the HOA from the new subdivision next door tried to claim a slice of it, I laughed it off, thinking it was a clerical mistake. But the day the letter arrived, the tone changed. It was an official-looking envelope, thick paper, gold lettering, and a seal so dramatic it practically screamed overcompensation. I opened it while standing in the doorway of my barn in progress. The roof wasn't even completed yet, but I was proud of how fast it was coming along. I expected the letter to be about noise, or dust, or your lumber pile is unsightly to community aesthetics. HOAs love that sort of thing. Instead, it read: this structure appears to be built on HOA-regulated property. Construction must cease immediately. Failure to comply will result in fines. My first thought was simple. On their land? How stupid do they think I am? I walked all 13 acres again, just to simmer down. My boots crushed yellow weeds, the winter breeze cut across my cheeks, and the barn loomed behind me like a quiet witness. My land. Every inch. Every stone. Every fence post hammered by me. I knew this soil better than anyone on earth. 2 hours later, I marched to the HOA office, not because I wanted answers, but because I wanted to see the look on their faces when I asked for them. The office sat at the front of their fancy neighborhood, glass walls, stone siding, and a front desk that looked like it belonged at a dentist's office. Sitting behind it was a woman whose hair was sprayed into a helmet of authority, crisp blonde curls, aggressively red lips, pearl earrings big enough to rent their own apartment. She smiled with the politeness of someone who would absolutely call the police on a child selling lemonade. "Welcome. How can I help you?" she chirped. I dropped the letter on the counter. "You sent this?" She adjusted her glasses, eyes scanning the paper. Yes. The barn. It's on my land." She lifted an eyebrow. "According to our maps, that is." "Debatable. Debatable." The word made my jaw tighten. "I owned that land decades before this subdivision existed," I said. "Your developer bought the lot next to mine, not mine. There's no overlap." She gave a pitying smile. "We have a surveying department. They know best." I leaned in. "I used to be in land development. I know how to read a plat map." "You're wrong." Her smile thinned, just enough to reveal the true personality beneath the pearls. "Well, sir, if you feel that way, you may dispute the claim in writing. Our board reviews such matters monthly." "Monthly?" I laughed. "You really think I'm going to halt construction on my own land for 30 days because of some imaginary boundary line?" She tapped manicured nails on the counter. "If you continue, we will issue fines." I stepped back, looked around their spotless office, their neighborhood with matching mailboxes and trimmed lawns identical as cloned sheep, and I realized something important. They weren't confused, they were bold. They wanted my land. The barn wasn't the problem. The barn was an excuse. Before I left, the woman added one last thing, voice dripping with condescension. "Your structure is also not approved by our architectural committee." I stared at her. "I am not in your HOA." "Well," she said, "if the land is determined to be ours, then you are." I laughed all the way back to my truck, but it wasn't happy laughter. It was the kind that meant war had officially begun. When I reached home again, I pulled out every deed, survey, map, and document I owned. I laid them across the farmhouse table and spent hours reviewing the boundaries, measuring, double-checking, cross-checking. Everything was crystal clear. The HOA was lying, or incompetent, or both. Still, I hired a licensed surveyor, my old friend Carlos, to do a fresh survey just to shut them up professionally. He agreed to come out the next morning. When he arrived, he whistled at the sight of the barn. "She's coming along nice. She might get me arrested," I muttered. As he worked, measuring, marking, making notes, he shook his head multiple times. "They're off by at least 50 feet, he said finally. "Your barn is well within your boundary line. Can you put that in writing?" He smirked. "I am going to print it, stamp it, sign it, and staple it to their forehead if needed." The survey report arrived 2 days later, and I marched back to the HOA office with it. The woman with the pearl earrings greeted me again. But when I placed the survey on the counter, her expression twitched, just slightly, just enough for me to know I had cracked her shell. "This is official," I said. "Tell your board to back off." She gave me a fake, too sweet smile. "Well, review it." But I saw it, panic. And that was when I knew. Something bigger was coming. They would not let this go. And I was not backing down either. The morning after the HOA president's heated accusation, Mark woke up earlier than usual. His barn wasn't just a building to him, it was his late grandfather's design, a project he had dreamed about since childhood. The idea that someone could stroll up and claim it wasn't on his land struck him as both absurd and infuriating. But instead of reacting emotionally, he decided he would settle this the old-fashioned way, with facts, maps, and measurements. By 8 a.m., he had already gathered his leather survey case, a bright orange tripod, and the digital theodolite he used for the county. The same tools he had used in dozens of certified land assessments now felt like weapons in a quiet war he never asked for. He walked toward the barn with a sense of purpose, the dewy grass crunching under every step. The previous day's confrontation had left him uneasy, but not intimidated. If anything, it reinforced something he had long suspected: the HOA did not like being told no, especially not by someone who lived just outside their control. Before he even set the equipment down, he noticed movement near the HOA entrance. A group of people, 4 of them, stood clustered at the end of their cul-de-sac. They were pretending to chat, but each one kept glancing toward Mark's property. The moment he raised the tripod, 2 of them scrambled back inside their homes as if he were performing some forbidden ritual. "Great," Mark muttered. "An audience." He began measuring from the known boundary marker, a weathered iron stake driven deep into the soil decades earlier. It was one of those markers every landowner respected because moving it was a felony. Mark dusted it off with his glove, checked its coordinates, and verified them against both county and state records. Everything lined up perfectly. He continued the survey, marking points, taking readings, and carefully logging the data. Each measurement confirmed the same thing: his barn was undeniably, unquestionably, 100% on his land. There was no overlap, no ambiguity, no shared usage zone, nothing. But the most interesting part came when he expanded the measurement outward. As he traced the HOA's property edge for comparison, something felt off. A lot off. Their boundary markers did not match the county's official map. Not even close. In fact, it looked like their property lines were shifted, by nearly 40 feet. Mark paused and frowned, recalculating to make sure he had not made an error. The numbers were correct. The HOA's houses, entire streets of them, were sitting at the wrong coordinates. Technically, they were trespassing. "No way," he whispered. "They built on the wrong grid?" He continued tracing until the picture formed clearly in his mind: the HOA's development map didn't align with the true official map at all. Their homes extended deep onto what should have been open county land that did not legally belong to them. He took more measurements, triple-checked the distance, and photographed everything. By the time he walked back toward his house, a file of evidence had formed, one that could flip this entire situation on its head. He had barely taken off his gloves when he heard footsteps approaching. He turned to see the HOA president, Eloise, striding toward him with the kind of confidence only someone absolutely convinced of their authority possessed. "We need to talk," she snapped. Her eyes were narrowed, and her lips were pinched tight. Mark crossed his arms. "About what?" "You were seen measuring things this morning," she said, as if that were a crime. "The HOA believes you are preparing to dispute our land assessment." "I am," Mark replied calmly. "Because your assessment is wrong." Her nostrils flared. "Everything we built was approved." "Everything. Your little barn is the only thing that does not belong. And the board will be filing an injunction by the end of the day." Mark let a slow breath out. "Eloise. Do you know how surveying works? At all?" "I know enough to say that your barn is not where you think it is," she said sharply. "Your equipment is outdated, and you are biased." He almost laughed. His equipment was top grade, identical to what the county itself used. But he stayed composed. "Before you embarrass yourself any further," Mark said, "I want you to look at the official records. The correct ones." Eloise stiffened. "We have our own maps." "I noticed," Mark replied. "And they are wrong by 40 feet. For a moment, she faltered. Just a flicker. But instead of reconsidering, she doubled down like a true HOA authoritarian. "That is impossible," she barked. "You are trying to confuse us. Our developers were professionals." "Your developers," Mark said gently, "did not follow state grid coordinates. They used internal markers, incorrect ones." Eloise's posture hardened again, but something in her eyes shifted. Panic. She knew he was not bluffing. "We will see you in court," she said coldly. "And we will win." Then she turned sharply and marched away, nearly tripping over her own feet in the grass. Mark watched her go, fully aware of what had really happened in that conversation. She was shaken. Because she knew the truth. Her entire HOA might be standing on land that never belonged to them. And when this reached a courtroom, they would not be the ones accusing. They would be the ones apologizing. Or worse, paying. The war had officially begun. By the time the next morning rolled around, Mark felt like he had aged a decade. He barely slept. His phone kept buzzing non-stop, neighbors asking questions, the county tagging him in emails, and his lawyer forwarding documents that needed signatures. But the strangest message came at 7:12 a.m. sharp. "Mr. Walsh, urgent. Please come to the County Land Records building immediately. Bring all your property documents. County Surveyor, Denise Talbot." Mark blinked twice. Denise was not one to exaggerate. If she said urgent, it meant something big. He grabbed his folder, stuffed in the barn blueprints, deed records, emails, and the drone photos he had taken of the area. Then he headed out the door with a feeling in his gut that something explosive was coming. The Land Records office was in chaos. When Mark walked inside, the energy hit him immediately. Employees were yelling across desks, printers were spitting out papers non-stop, and 3 supervisors were arguing over zoning codes like the fate of humanity depended on it. Denise spotted Mark from her office door and waved him in with a stiff gesture. "Sit," she said. This just became a nuclear situation. Mark gulped. "Because of the HOA?" She exhaled sharply. "Not just the HOA. The entire subdivision." He froze. "My barn caused that much trouble?" She shook her head. "Not your barn, their stupidity." Denise clicked a button on her screen, revealing a high-resolution topographical map. She zoomed in on the HOA's neighborhood, then highlighted several parcels in red. Mark frowned. "Those are the houses behind me." She nodded. "Yes. And according to the original county survey from 1978, the boundary line runs here." She drew a long diagonal line across the map. Mark's mouth slowly fell open. But that means. Yes, she said grimly. 8 houses, almost an entire row, were built on your land. Mark nearly choked. You're kidding. I wish I were. The HOA leaders had known. And hidden it. Denise clicked through archived documents, growth plans, and legal notes. Then she pulled up one file and spun the monitor so Mark could read it clearly. The HOA's founding president, a man long gone now, had submitted a zoning revision in the early 1990s. Attached was a hand-drawn boundary map. A false boundary map. A deliberate false map. Mark stared at it. This is fraud. Denise nodded. Yes. And if they attempt to challenge you in court over your barn, this issue will be exposed automatically. Mark leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed. So the HOA thinks my barn is on their land, but their houses are actually on mine. Exactly. And they were ready to sue me. Correct. And once this comes out. Denise folded her arms. Their HOA will be annihilated. The county will force immediate correction, and depending on how the judge handles it, those homeowners could be forced to buy the land from you. Or vacate entirely. Mark stared at the ceiling. This is insane. Welcome to my Tuesday, she muttered. The conversation that sealed their fate. Denise said, we need you to answer one question. Mark sat up straighter. Okay. If this goes to court, and trust me, it will, are you willing to testify, provide documents, and defend your property rights fully? Mark blinked. Why would I not? Because, she said calmly, you now have the legal leverage to do something very few landowners ever get the chance to do. You can reclaim every square foot they stole. Mark swallowed hard. He did not want war. He did not want to kick families out of their homes. All he wanted was to build a barn. He rubbed his forehead. This is going to get ugly. Denise nodded. Yes. But you did nothing wrong. Mark sighed. I'll defend my rights. But I'm not trying to ruin innocent families. Denise gave him a soft smile. That is exactly the attitude the court respects. The HOA president's panic call. An hour later, as Mark sat in the parking lot thinking through everything, his phone rang. Mr. Walsh. It was Karen, the HOA president's wife, practically shrieking. Mark answered calmly. Hello, Karen. How dare you send county officials to our neighborhood? They're all over the place. Survey trucks. Inspectors. Maps. Do you know what you caused? Mark leaned his head back and exhaled. I did not cause anything. The county discovered a. I do not care what they discovered. She interrupted. You better fix it. You better fix all of it. Right. Now. Mark stared out the windshield, watching a pair of survey drones fly overhead toward the neighborhood. He smiled faintly. I cannot help you, he said. But the truth can. What truth? Oh, Mark said gently, you will find out very soon. What does that mean? She screeched. Mark ended the call. The storm had begun. And the HOA was about to learn they had been sitting on a landmine for 30 years. The courtroom was silent enough to hear the air conditioner hum as Judge Aldridge returned to her seat, thick file in hand. The file contained every survey map, every deed, every GPS reading, and every photograph I had provided. The HOA board members, especially their president, Beverly, sat stiffly, their cheap confidence finally replaced with the sinking awareness that things were not going the way they had planned. Their lawyer, a narrow-faced man who had come in puffed up with arrogance, was now frantically scanning his notes as if he had any argument left to stand on. He did not. The truth had been clear since the moment the licensed state surveyor testified that my land boundaries matched my maps exactly, and the HOA's. Did not. Judge Aldridge cleared her throat. Before I deliver judgment, I want to state plainly, she began, that this case never needed to come this far. The evidence is overwhelming. The HOA made claims without verifying their own records and proceeded to bully a private landowner despite being repeatedly shown proof to the contrary. Beverly squirmed, her rigid hair refusing to move even though the rest of her looked moments away from collapsing. The judge lifted the first document. This is the original 1968 deed for the property in question. Mr. Callahan's barn sits entirely within the legal boundaries described here. She held up another. This is the HOA's map. A photocopy of a survey done 30 years ago. Not only is it outdated, it is incorrect by almost 60 meters. I had expected to feel triumphant hearing that, but instead I felt a strange heaviness. Maybe it was exhaustion after months of fighting. Maybe it was disbelief that adults needed a judge to explain what basic reading of land documents could have told them. Furthermore, the judge continued, the HOA insists that Mr. Callahan's barn is trespassing onto community land. But based on the accurate surveys provided, it is the HOA's homes, particularly the cul-de-sac homes on the east side, that are built directly over Mr. Callahan's property line. Gasps erupted in the courtroom. One homeowner in the back sank into his seat as if his mortgage had personally betrayed him. Another clutched his chest, whispering, "No, no, no." Beverly shot to her feet. That is impossible. Those houses were approved by the county. They. Sit down, Mrs. Grant, the judge said sharply. Your HOA hired a private contractor who misread the documents decades ago. Your board then continued relying on those wrong documents instead of verifying them. Beverly sat. She did not breathe. In conclusion, the judge said, lifting the final paper, there is no legal basis for the HOA's claim over Mr. Callahan's barn. In fact, given the extreme negligence demonstrated, this court is granting Mr. Callahan full rights to all structures built on his land, intentionally or not. The room exploded into noise again, shouts, groans, one homeowner muttering, "My wife is gonna leave me." But the judge was not done. Additionally, she said, raising her voice until silence returned, the HOA will be fined for harassment, for knowingly filing a false claim, and for attempting to enforce authority where they have none. Beverly looked like she had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Her lawyer slumped over, defeated. And finally, the judge added, this HOA is hereby ordered to cease operations immediately until the county can determine whether it is even viable to continue existing under such egregious mismanagement. That was it. The HOA was finished. I did not cheer, though part of me wanted to. Instead, I stood, nodded respectfully to the judge, and gathered my folder. Neighbors approached me, some apologizing, others begging to know what would happen to their houses now. I explained gently. I was not planning to bulldoze their homes or charge them rent or anything malicious. I simply wanted peace. Outside the courthouse, Beverly approached. Her voice shook. You planned this. You wanted to embarrass us. No, I said calmly. But you did that yourselves. You could have just let the HOA handle things. She snapped. Beverly, I replied, the HOA cannot handle anything. That is why we are here. Her jaw clenched. She opened her mouth to argue again, then realized nothing she said would change anything. She got into her SUV and slammed the door so hard the entire parking lot heard it. I walked to my truck where my friend and surveyor, Mark, was leaning against the door. Told you the evidence was bulletproof, he said with a grin. You are officially the only man I know who owns a barn, and half a cul-de-sac. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Now I just want to go home. We drove back to my land. The barn stood tall and solid, just as it always had. But now it felt different, like a symbol instead of just a building. A reminder that bullies, no matter how loud or organized, crumble when the truth hits them harder than their arrogance. As the sun set over my fields, I finally breathed freely. My land was mine again. My peace was restored. And the HOA? Gone, flattened by their own lies. Tomorrow I would hang a small wooden sign beside the barn doors. Respect is free. Arrogance is expensive. And after today, the HOA knew exactly how expensive.